Hello, namaste, very good evening, and welcome to Citti Media. We are joined by Dr. Ratan Sharda today for a conversation about his upcoming book, which has already created a lot of waves because this is supposed to be the possibly the first academic study of the RSS that is based on a lot of the internal resolutions that have been passed. And the book is called Conflict Resolution: The RSS Way, and it's focused on three main areas of internal security, which is Jammu Kashmir, Punjab, and the Northeast. And Dr. Ratan Sharda has put this forward in a very elaborate manner, and that is what we are here to discuss today. Ratanji, thank you so much. Namaste, and I hope everything is well with you.
Wonderful to see you. And this will be my first program on my book. So I thank you for being the first one to host it.
Oh, thank you so much. It's an honor. And what was the thought that went behind this book? Because obviously you've written books about the Sangh. You've sort of demystified some of the theories that are floated in the air by the left liberal ecosystem. But here you have brought this out to the open. So do we see a sense of change in policy of the Sangh as far as these matters are concerned?
See, first of all, this book is not on behalf of Sangha. It is a book of my own study. Sangha has not given any guideline. None of my books have been prompted by Sangha or Sangha leadership except Sangha and Swaraj, which being an annexure of my RSS 360, a senior adhikari, suggested that I expand that idea and come up with a book which is small enough to be distributed and educate people. So that was the only book which was suggested by a senior adhikari. All other books are my own idea. This book is not my own idea in a way that my guide for this PhD, which is the basis of this book, Dr. Yashwant Pathak, who is a co-author in this book as an author of his work, he suggested that nobody has studied RSS internal documents nor its resolutions, which are the basis of its policy making. See, till the social media came, till the Prachar Vibhag of RSS or media was introduced somewhere in 1890s, the only communication was the Pratinidhi Sabha and the Kendriya Karyakarani, which defined the policies, defined its responses to various challenges of facing the country and various other issues. So these were the documents which were discussed thoroughly in those committees and those plenary sessions, and sometimes over a day or 2 days these were finalized, and then these resolutions are thrashed out. So I would say that these are actually the authorized, authoritative views of RSS on any topic that has come so far in the national life of India, independent India, because these Pratinidhi Sabha, etc., began somewhere in 1951-52 after the ban and reorganization of the Sangha. So this particular book was to be, the study was to be based on RSS resolutions. Then I found after classifying the various resolutions on various topics that there are too many topics which I can't cover. So I decided to focus on any one conflict area, because you'll be surprised that largest number of resolutions passed by RSS are on the three topics which you just mentioned, as Northeast region, Punjab and Jammu Kashmir. These are one of the earliest challenges to India's integration, India's integrity, and post-independence Bharat. And these were continuously being monitored, some intervention is asked by RSS continuously. Right? So these needed to be put in the right perspective. What has happened is that RSS has been continuously now in a sustained manner viewed as a Hindutva organization, as a terror organization, as a violent organization. And the entire debate has been around the philosophy of Hindutva or Hindu Rashtra. But much bigger role of RSS in the developing aspect post-independence, in evolution of its socio-political thoughts, its security issues have been largely neglected. RSS being a social organization which is all India, which has allied organizations in every social sphere, has played much bigger role in defining the socio-cultural issues and policies of this country, which many people have not really appreciated or understood. So that gave me an idea that we should go ahead and do the research on these three topics. So each of them could be actually one topic each for the research. But I thought it better to put it together, because that was also give an idea how RSS looks at different conflict zones in a different way. It is not monochromatic view or one-eyed view like leftist have. It has much wider perspective, much more varied, fine-tuned response to various issues, which I came to know, which I came to realize as I went on with the study. It took me 4 years to complete the PhD thesis.
Right.
And after this book was to be made into which was to be converted to a book, I had to struggle for nearly 8 to 10 months to convert into a book which is much more readable and a free-flowing kind of content which can be read easily by the people. So that led to another 8 to 10 months of work before this book took shape. So this is the background of this entire book.
So, in terms of the divergences, what would you say? What do your research findings point out? Because the BJP, as a state policy, might have certain type of resolutions or policies from different leadership. Of course, the Vajpayee leadership had a different view of how they could handle Kashmir, and now Modi government is handling it in a different way. But is there a sense of continuity to some of the conflicts that we have seen in India, especially the three regions that you have mentioned in the book? And is there continuity in terms of the policy recommendations that the Sangh has made over time? And also, what are the divergences you see with the establishment? That would be, I think, the most interesting part to hear from you.
Yeah, so see, let us look at the way RSS looks at various issues in the society. Let us also look at how the government was able to counter insurgencies and conflicts in various regions. I got some studies done by US government department and various other people who work on conflict zones. There are about 130 to 300 insurgencies in the recent past world over, out of which 36%, which were over 10 years, went into in the favor of insurgents. 28% had mixed outcomes. With less than 8 years, some of the significant concessions were given to calm down the conflict. 36% ended with government victory with an average duration of 12 years. If you look at, and there are about half a dozen, 2 dozen insurgencies which are not resolved for 20 years. And Sri Lanka was one of the longest insurgency from 1983 to 2009, that is 26 years. So considering the age of conflict that we faced in Northeast, which has some areas are still have some problem, Punjab, which was closed, now recently reopened by the with the help of foreign powers by some, in a minor way, by the so-called Khalistanis, and Jammu Kashmir, which is much under control. So if you look at the way these different regions are looked at by RSS, it's very interesting. For example, in Jammu Kashmir, it realized that the root cause was Islamic fundamentalism. So to oppose Sheikh Abdullah right from day one, right from 41 onwards, when Sheikh Abdullah mobbed himself from Muslim conference or national conference, it went very strongly against Sheikh Abdullah. That is the reason Sheikh Abdullah hated RSS. The family hates us. But after that, when the Article 370 was imposed, before even that, I would say, I had given short history of RSS work in these regions. So right from registering the Kabaili attack, losing hundreds of its volunteers, to work with the Dogra army and later with the Indian army, that was one aspect. So 370 came and RSS took a stand against 370, then against the citizenship bill. And RSS was the first one to discover 35A, which was the dirtiest clause which resulted in denying citizenship to nearly 1 million people who ended up on the wrong side of partition that was there. So most of the liable people had ended up in Punjab or Delhi. 2 of them became prime ministers. But those who were poor from scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, those who ended up in Kashmir side, they did not get citizenship for nearly 70 years till the 370 was scrapped. And women didn't get rights, as you know, that has been talked about enough. But this was initially brought out by RSS supported organizations, RSS itself. And that is how it was able to convince people how it is inhuman for everybody, including the scheduled caste people who came from Punjab, called Valmikis, were not given any citizenship right, or Gorkhas, etc. So this kind of things were highlighted by RSS. It went very strongly with the agitation of Praja Parishad. It went on in a sustained way of educating people on Jammu Kashmir. Then on the way, it was the first one to offer a solution of trifurcation or dividing Jammu Kashmir into 3 regions. which has been recently done by the government. So you see that at the end of the day, RSS line proved to be correct. All the lines waffling by other political parties didn't take us anywhere. In Punjab, the problem of Punjab was that Congress was loath to give power to Akali Dal. It opposed creation of Punjabi Suba, despite state reorganization had taken place nearly a decade ahead in every other part of India, but Punjab was given statehood somewhere in 1996. Now this is 1966 because Congress thought that once the Punjabi Suba comes, they might lose power. It went against the Punjabi language, even Arya Samaj went against it, but Guruji took very strong stance against even Jansangh people to say this is utter nonsense, this is your mother tongue. Don't get influenced by the leaders of those time who wanted Punjabi non-Sikhs to declare their mother tongue as Hindi. So there are so many issues like this. When the insurgency started, its biggest effort was not to allow division between Punjabis and non-Sikhs and non-Sikhs, because in Punjab we didn't call it Hindu and Sikhs earlier on. It was Monas and Keshdharis. And then slowly, because of insistence of some Sikh bodies, then okay, Sikhs and Hindus, because if that they felt better that way. But this was what it was, and it's one of the finest chapters. I've managed to meet one ex-pracharak, then family man, who led this Punjab Rashtriya Suraksha Samiti, a brave, wonderful man. And when I was trying to find out people of that time, a friend of mine's, an RSS Swayamsevak, so they took me to Himachal, and we met there. And he was so happy that finally what he did and Swayamsevak did is going to be documented. He had cuttings, hundreds of cuttings of his morchas, his public meetings, or Rashtriya Suraksha Samiti meetings, etc. It was personal account, and it showed how RSS actually stood up against all these rogue elements. It lost its people. If you remember, there was huge Moga firing where 25 of RSS Swayamsevaks died. And there are also two other cases which are not very known, Dabwali and Ludhiana. So that is the price it paid, apart from many other people harassed, killed, and various things. So it was the stand there was to not allow any kind of division, whatever happens. Then if you go to Northeast, it realized its power, its strength, its limited strength. It also realized the real problem with Northeast is the church has been trying for nearly 130 years to try to separate tribals from mainland Bharat, show them they're different from India, and show them their culture is different, convert them, which was happening in a big way. All this led to a situation where, and the power of the church was huge, it had funds were huge, people who went there to work were harassed. There was Vivekanand Kendra, there was a Ramakrishna Mission, and then there was Sangha, there was Seva Bharati. So when they went to work there, they realized it's not very easy to work openly. So the strategy was to not to convert the tribal into the mainstream, what is called as Hinduism or Hindu Dharma. Typically, while some Sant will go and say, you eat beef, you cannot be Hindu, you are non-veg, can't be Hindu, none of those things. The RSS went on to strengthen the tribal roots of those people, strengthen their resolve to live with their own culture and defy the diktat of church and defy the conversion pressure, and also defy the terrorists promoted by those people. So there the situation was to go into the Seva Karya, get into strengthening the indigenous cultures. And if you see slowly over 70 years of effort, now you find Northeast is changing. So it has been a very long-term vision. Everywhere the situation, it has been fine-tuned. It has been tuned to the local requirements. At the same time, never compromising on national security. One example which I love to talk about how tough the work was and how dogged was the perseverance of the people. There was one Shankar Dinkar or Bhaiyaji Kane, who was a teacher, senior teacher. He was inspired by Sri Guruji to go to Northeast to open some schools there. So he went all the way to a place called Ukhrul, which is just 6 kilometers from Burma, Myanmar border in Manipur. And it is a place where it takes days to go there. And he went there, he started a school. Then he thought maybe the kids should be taken to, India, Mumbai, etc. So they get to have that integrated feeling with the people of Bharat, and they feel they are one. So he decided to take the students to Mumbai. He came from Dombivli area, Thane, but people opposed. Some people said this guy is going to take the kids, is going to sell them, and all kind of rumors. He had no solution what to do. But he had a student with him called Jayant Kodvilkar. Very small student, you can understand. So he suggested that you keep Jayant with you. I'll take the kids. I come back with the kids. You can release Jayant. They agreed. So look at the sheer readiness of the teacher and also the student, trust of the student in his teacher, that he agreed to stay back. And happily, this Jayant ji is still working for Northeast schools. This is the kind of dedication that people have been there. So, pracharaks have been killed, workers have been killed, but nothing has stopped the work of RSS and its allied organizations, other Hindu organizations. There is a gentleman, Vijay Swami, who was in Pune, inspired by Vivekanand Kendra, an engineer. He went to Arunachal, is working for 30 years with the tribals. So this is the kind of work that RSS does. And lastly, also, it doesn't look at isolated incidents in a separate way. So whether the incident of terror happens in Kerala, whether it's in Kashmir or Punjab or Northeast or Naxalbari, his resolution show that was able to connect the dot and tell you that there was a connection between Khalistanis and jihadis in Kashmir. Then those had links with Northeast terrorists. They had links with Naxals, and that they had links with ISI people who created mayhem in Marat beach when Hindus were murdered on the beach, fishermen. So this is the kind of integral view that RSS took about various issues.
This is extremely interesting. And what also interests me is the timing of this, because I think it's very relevant, especially because a lot of these insurgencies are gaining strength in the recent times, if you look at it. And in the last 2 days itself, you've witnessed a lot of incidents in the Northeast. Now, again, the Khalistani movement is being fueled by internal and external elements. So, would you say that there would be probably a possible change in the way that the RSS looks at these particular events going forward?
See, it is not RSS that has to look at these events, because if you read the book, you'll find that its stand has been quite clear, and the stand still stands. It has not what it has the way it has looked at issues of Jammu Kashmir or Northeast or Punjab is still relevant. And this particular aspect of Khalistan at sea is not sudden, because this manipulation of people's mind has been carried on since 1984 or so by Pakistan and the Khalistani elements. They have not only done this, they have tried to change the tone and tenor of teachings of gurus, of the historians. Now, Khalistanis treat the British man Macaulay's history as the sacred history, which is the basis of their entire argument. But they have put aside great historians and saints like Bhai Gurdas, and they have diluted the way that is being presented. I was surprised in one of my YouTube, one of the panelists told that Guru Granth Sahib part does not go beyond page number 1400. The number of pages are 1500 plus. Because in the latter part, there's a lot of mention of Hindu pantheon of gods like Govind, Shiv, and Ram, etc., Hari. So then also, if you look at the way the interpretation is done, all the 6 sites, which are very well maintained, very wonderful, very informative, some of the best works there, software engineering, etc. But it is from Gurmukhi to English. There is no mention of Hindi at all. Why, I do not know. And if you look at the way they change the meaning, for example, there is a body of Bhai Gurdas which says temples were destroyed and mosques were raised. This is the original Doha. How it is presented in the English, temples were replaced by mosque. You see the sudden twist. As if it happened, people said, chalo, bahut mandir ho gaya, chalo, abhi masjid mein yahi puja karenge, masjid bana denge. Then there is a very interesting body, which says, cows and poor were killed, increasing sin on the earth. This was translated as less powerful were killed, and earth became replete with sin. So mention of cow is avoided. And there are many other things. The Dasham Granth is no more given importance. There are doubts being raised that Dasham Granth is not entirely Guru Gobind Singh's creation, but there were some Bhagats who made some observations which are not typically Guru Gobind Singh's. But there are many such things which have been built over years. It is not something that has suddenly come up. Now, we are able to keep a track, but whether governments keep a track, whether we are able to create a counter with the right history, these are the things that come to mind. And also, again, the effort to divide Hindu Sikhs, the latest sacrilege act, and the person who did the sacrilege is killing the person rather than trying to find the source of this entire mischief conspiracy. The way the politicians have started behaving, it reminds me eerily of the kind of fun, or I would say, a lack of sincerity when the terrorism, set roots in Punjab. Both Congress and Akalis tried to ride the tiger. In fact, there is a statement in my book where one of the leaders says that Sant Bhindrewala is our danda with which we can beat the government. But it later turned out the danda was more powerful than these people, and they couldn't control him. So the plot was lost in Punjab. The creation of separatism, as I said, first talked about the organization of the state, then of creation of Bhindranwala by Congress led by Indira Gandhi ji. Then you had so many developments, which I mentioned in the book. This book is special because I am not talking just of RSS. I have picked up a resolution, given the data about the situation at that time from various sources outside RSS, newspaper, media, intellectuals, leaders. Then I have also shown how people reacted to it, the so-called intellectuals or opinion leaders and political leaders, and what was RSS view, what RSS did on field,
Right.
where it failed to do something, where it did something. So it is a complete, I would say, a way of looking at post-independent history in these regions via these resolutions.
Right.
That is an important aspect that is not purely an RSS book. It is a book of national importance, of national history, contemporary history.
Right.
On the
Would
same,
you,
what
would you
RSS.
also agree with me if I said that Jammu and Kashmir, the Northeast, Punjab and Haryana to a certain degree was also one of the most difficult regions or states to penetrate, especially as far as the RSS is concerned, for a very long time?
See, at one time, the Kashmir Valley had hundreds of RSS shakas. Then because of terrorism, because of exodus of Kashmiri Hindus of those time, 90 was the latest one. It also happened in 31, it happened in 47, 48. Then the trickle was continuing. So the strength of RSS decreased. Jammu was strong. Punjab was very strong. All the situation that was the worst in terms of armed insurgency. RSS had wonderful strength in Punjab, largest number of shakas. That is why it could fight the violence during partition. It could help save millions of people. So lost its own people. Its people suffered a lot in terms of family separating, in terms of business, in terms of jobs, and before they ended up in Bharat. So these things I have mentioned in the initial introduction, but they have very strong strength. In Bengal, yes, Northeast had no strength. It began in 1950. In fact, when Eknath Ranade went there, there was Shaka before there in 1946. Dattopant went there. But after the ban, there was no work. So when Eknath Ranade, who was the founder of Vivekananda Rock Memorial, at that time was General Secretary. He went to, at that time, Assam was one big state. He went there, stayed there for about a month. When he came back, he said, if you don't start work now, in 30 years, this region will be gone out of Bharat. So he rushed to Maharashtra. There was a camp there. He requested the Swayamsevak who were there in the Varga to join the work of Northeast somehow so we can save that region. And 10 pracharaks were immediately deputed from 8 from Maharashtra and 2 from North, who went there and settled down there to put the work of RSS together. And that is how, over a period of time, from being only a organization of local Rajasthanis, migrants, and city people, it went into deep inside the tribal areas and slowly it built up its cadre. But so in terms of its strength at that time, Punjab was strongest, next was Jammu Kashmir, and last was Northeast.
Right. And if you plan to write another book on the same lines, would you consider writing one on Bengal, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala? Because that seems to be the conversational point these days.
Right now, I have not thought about it. There are
Right.
so many topics that come to mind.
But you do agree, right? Because Bengal,
do
Kerala, and
hope,
Tamil Nadu has become somehow the
yeah,
hotbed of communal tensions and a lot of internal
yeah.
security risk factors
See,
as well.
RSS leadership paid a lot of focus on Northeast. If you look at the number of top leaders who went to Northeast continuously, and if you look at any of the Sarsang Chalak of RSS, nearly all of them have spent a very important part of their pracharakship in Northeast. Even after Atal Bihari Vajpayee, if you realize it was the first government to introduce a ministry for Northeast. And then if you look at Modi government, of course, a lot of things have happened, even much more than what Vajpayee started off, because in between UPA came, it didn't pay any attention despite the Prime Minister notionally being from Assam. So that has changed the scenario a lot. The groundwork done by RSS and allied organizations, on the top of that wonderful Vikas done by development done by Modi government, has seen that tide has turned. there will always be a pocket of either insurgencies. Not only that, RSS also stood up for all other sufferers like Riyang tribe, like Chakmas of Bangladesh, etc. Local people in Tripura, everywhere where they felt threatened, where they were bullied by the terrorists backed by church, RSS was there. So much more than its strength, and that is how it was able to change the course of Northeast, it was able to change the course of Punjab, it was able to change the course of Jammu Kashmir. That would be the strength of it. And yes, there are too many topics to be researched within itself. If you look at it, I think I opened a door to many other research students who should look at resolutions, look at RSS, handling of many other issues that themselves could become a very wonderful topic for research and PhDs.
Right. I haven't read the book so far, but once we finish reading the book, I will definitely have another conversation with you based on what exactly you have to say, because it seems to be very, very promising. And very good luck with your book. I'm sure it will sell a lot of copies.
Thank you so much. And we will discuss at length once you have read the book also. And I'm happy to tell you that a lot of people who are happy buying and distributing the book to well-wishers, to people in academics, because my idea behind it was to bring RSS work into mainstream academics, not just Hindutva and those typical paradigms which are trying to define RSS, but to much more than what RSS has done and recognize its strength, and also understand how a social organization can take an interventionist role. You have civil societies which only work for insurgency, which work for human rights. When anything happens, when governments try to suppress the insurgency, their stand is somehow to stall that government work, stall the fight of terror. If you look at Punjab, for example, after that, none of these human rights people spoke, but once the insurgency was suppressed by KPS Gill and the government of Beyant Singh, in fact, who paid with his life, these people cropped up like mushrooms. They went to courts and hundreds of cases are filed against policemen. And no government tried to help them in a way that they could be shielded, and one of the prominent DGPs actually committed suicide. So if that is the situation, you can understand how important it is to understand the role of RSS, which did not just criticize the governments or the political parties when they didn't correct that their stand was not correct, which tried to put the right kind of views in front of the society, but it also worked to somehow safeguard the security and integrity of the nation. So you can have criticism of the government, you can criticize the government, you can work, you can go against what the so-called mainstream thought of that time is, but you will work for the society and see to it that the nation is not hurt. This lesson of RSS must be taken as the positive of an organization who can help the nation come out of this struggle. That is an important lesson.
Right. Wishing you a very good luck for the success of your book. Thank you so much for joining us today. Namaste. And I hope we can have a conversation again.
Yeah, this is the book just for a decent book.
Please do show our viewers, and we'll be putting up the link in our description below. Thank you so much, Ratanji. It was an absolute pleasure having a conversation with
you again. Thank you.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.